In this video, we're going to look at some ways to split up a large chart and use some tactics for overlaps to help the knitter keep track of where they've got to in a chart and how the separate chart portions connect together. So I've got a chart here that is by no means the biggest chart that somebody might ever design, but you can see it's not a chart that has obvious repeats. So we couldn't, for instance, select the first 10 stitches and say knit these stitches 5 times over the row or the round, because every area of the chart is slightly different. So what I'm going to do here is split this chart into 4 sections, so 4 quarters. And first of all, I'll start with where the knitter will start. So I'm going to select row 1 up to row 15, and I'm going to select along to column 25. So the first 25 stitches and the first 15 rows. I'm using the marquee select tool, and I'm making sure that my dotted line goes around the entirety of those stitches that I want to select. Releasing it will make the stitches go grey, which means they've been selected. And I'm going to add them to my clipboard by using Control and C on my keyboard, or Command and C if you're on a Mac, or of course we've got various ways that you can copy in the menus and in the icon menu. What I'll do now is come to Insert and Insert Chart, and this is going to be the bottom right quarter. You might have a more descriptive name you prefer to use. It will have 15 rows and 25 columns. The first column number will be 1 and the first row number will be 1. It's a flat piece of knitting, and the first row is indeed a right side row. So I'll click OK, and we get our new chart here. What I'll do now is come to the arrow select tool, click in the top left hand corner of the new chart, and then use Ctrl and V to paste the stitches I'd copied into the new chart. And then we'll add another chart to add in the next section. So again, Insert Chart. This time it will be the top right quarter. And this time we're going to have 16 rows, because what I'm going to do is to copy row 15 as well, even though we've worked that row already, and we'll pop a border around this row to say you've already worked this row, but it's so that it's there in the chart to help the knitter work out just where they are. And number of columns again will be the 25. So our first row number is going to be 15, and that is still a right side row. The first column number will still be 1 because it's the first column of stitches. And Stitchmastery's added our new chart over here. Now what I'm going to do is just zoom out. That's probably a little too small. Let's zoom to 50 and see how that does. Because what I would like to do now is to rearrange these charts so that they're sitting roughly as they would in the one piece. So I've selected this chart, the bottom right quarter, by clicking just in line with the number labels, so not in the chart itself, but just by them. And I'm going to click and drag and pop this chart underneath the one for the top right quarter. And this could be slightly better in line, just drag it slightly to the side. Of course, you're planning to have these on separate pages when you export them, and you'll export them all individually, so they don't have to match up perfectly in your drawing area. It's just for the demonstration in this video. So now we'll get the colourwork stitches to go in the top right quarter. So selecting the top left stitch, so column 25 again, and I'm going to hold down my shift button and select the opposite corner. Again, Control and C, click in the right cell at the top left of the new chart and paste to send those stitches in. So if we take a look at this, we've got our row 15 appearing in both charts, so you can see they almost line up. And what to do here, I mentioned that we would add a border to these stitches. If you were creating a chart that was with lace or cables, you could make these stitches grey or another colour to identify that they've already been worked. So the symbols would still appear over the colour and the knitter would be able to use that to look at their knitting and see where they've got to in the chart. But of course with the colour work chart, then if I make all these stitches grey, the whole point of doing that is lost because we'd lose where the difference in stitch colour was. So let's select this row and come to border and place border on selected stitches, and I want all sides. So Stitchmastery has automatically added a thin red border and an item in the key. If I select that in the key, I can then come to border and edit border properties. And I'm going to call this something along the lines of "You've already worked these." And I have a typo there. Still have a typo there. And I'm going to make this border a little bit more solid because I really want it to be obvious and not something that people are going to miss. So I've made that 5 wide. And I'm going to change the colour because obviously red and green are not good contrasts for people with colour blindness in some cases. So I'll try this sort of plum purple colour. Hopefully that will stand out well from the rest of the grid. So you've already worked these. Hopefully that will be clear to the knitter. You don't need to knit these stitches again. As it's a flat piece, they're obviously going to be starting on a wrong side row when they come to this point anyway, when they get onto this chart. So hopefully that will make it really clear that they don't need to knit these stitches again. They've already been done. Now let's do the other half of the chart. So I'm going to do column 24 to the end, and again rows 1 to 15. So I'll select those stitches and copy them. Again, we need to insert a new chart. So this is going to be the bottom left quarter, 15 rows, and we'll be having 27 columns. 25 would be 26 to 50 would be the last 25, 26 and 27. And the first column number will be 24. And this is flat. The first side is a right side row. First row is a right side row. So Stitchmastery has added the new chart over at the side and has rearranged these charts. So let's just zoom out a little and rearrange them back into the order we want them to go. So this one is the bottom right. This one is the bottom left. We'll pop that in here. Of course, these are going to be included on separate pattern pages, so they don't have to match up perfectly in this screen. It's just to help the video be a little bit easier to follow. And let's just bring our key in a little tighter as well. Now I'm going to fit to height so that we can see a little bit easier. So we've got our stitches almost matching up here, and again we've got our columns 24 and 25 being repeated in both charts. Now let's copy our stitches across, so 15 to 24, copy and paste into the new chart. Now, there is a little dilemma here. If this was a circular chart, this would be very easy to do exactly the same thing with a border that says you've already worked these stitches for the ones that have been repeated, because obviously every row in the chart for a circular item is being worked right to left. So for instance, we would work our row 7, coming along here, we'd finish with 4 white and the 1 green, and then these stitches would have a border around saying you've worked this white and green already, and you'd be able to start on here, and that's going to be helpful up around this area where it changes. But this is a flat piece, so that means that, for instance, our row 6 is a wrong side row and is worked left to right on the chart. So we'd come along here, knit 3 green, 1 white, and then we would be told you've worked this green and white stitch already, which is obviously incorrect because that was referring to these stitches. And the neatest way I can think to approach this is actually to find a way of marcating columns 24 and 25 in both charts, and instead of saying you've already worked these, just say these are overlap stitches, and then have an explanation in your pattern that says only work these stitches once. So if you're working on a right side row, you can work them here and then ignore them in the second chart. If you're working a wrong side row, you can work them from here and ignore them at the start of your next chart. So that is probably the neatest option. Of course, you can add the border to the relevant stitches on each side. So obviously in your right side rows, you'd be selecting the stitches in the left quarter chart, in the left hand chart. So we can come to border and add existing border on stitches. And then you would do the same for the wrong side rows on the chart on the right hand side. So I'm selecting these stitches by clicking on them while holding Control down, and again add existing border. So this does make sense. On a right side row you're knitting stitches 1 through 25, then you come on to the next part of your chart and you've already worked stitches 24 and 25 previously, so you'll begin stitch 26. On the wrong side rows you'll come 1 through 25 technically, then you'll knit these two as you come to them because you haven't worked them already, and then you move on to the next chart and it says you've already worked those 2 stitches. So it does make sense. Or you can also use the option to hide these stitches or mark them as no stitch. So if we come to basic stitches, do the cross no stitch, because obviously the grey might lead the knitter to think that they had to knit some stitches in grey. Make those no stitches, and then we can select the chart and hide the no stitches. So you'd come along to here and then you'd knit over here. But that kind of defeats the purpose a bit, and I think it is more confusing. So I think probably the best option is to put a different border around these columns in both charts and say this is an overlap area from the previous chart, only knit the stitches or only work the stitches once. And of course our top left quarter. So we're going to create a chart, and so this would be the top left. We'll have 16 rows because we're starting with 15 and going up to 30. We're going to have again 27 columns. Now our first row number is going to be row 15. Our first column number is 24. It's a flat piece, and our first row is still a right side row. As we can see, we've got 24 through 50 and 15 through 30. So that's going to sit above this chart, which is just popped over here, and just quickly drag that below. So you'll knit 1 through 15, you'll have 15 copied again, and then you start at 16. Hopefully that's helpful. If you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch, and if you have any suggestions about the overlapping columns issue, then please do add a comment underneath this video and let us know how you would approach that.